Mr. Stink, episode 21, Wet Wipe. Why don't you come too? Shouted Chloe to Annabelle over the thunderous noise of the blades. No, this is your day, Chloe, her little sister hollered back. This is because of you. And besides, that helicopter's tiny. It's absolutely whiffing there. Chloe grinned and waved goodbye as the helicopter slowly ascended, flattening most of the plants and flowers in the garden as it did. Mother's bouffant danced around her head like candy floss on a windy day at the seafront as she attempted to hold it down. Elizabeth the cat got blown across the lawn. She tried desperately to cling onto the grass with her claws, but despite meowing for mercy, the wind from the blades was just too strong and she shot across the garden like a cannonball. The Duchess looked down from the helicopter window, smirking. As they glided up and up and up, Chloe saw her house and her street and her town get smaller and smaller. Soon the postal districts were packed below her like squares on a chessboard. It was unutterably thrilling. For the first time in her life, Chloe felt like she was at the centre of the world. She looked over at Mr. Stink. He was getting reacquainted with the toffee bonbon that, from the looks of it, had been in his trouser pocket since the 50s. Apart from his jaw working desperately to chew the ancient confectionery, he looked perfectly relaxed, as if taking a helicopter ride to see the Prime Minister was something he did all the time. Chloe smiled at him, and he smiled back with that little twinkle in his eye that almost made you forget how badly he smelled. Mr. Stink tapped on the pilot's shoulder. Are you going to be coming round with the trolley service at any point? He said. It's just a short flight, sir. Any chance of a cup of tea and a bun then? I'm very sorry, sir, replied the pilot with a firmness that suggested this conversation was about to be over. Very disappointing, said Mr. Stink. Chloe recognised the door of number 10 immediately because it was always on those boring political shows. It was big and black and always had a policeman standing outside. She thought, if I joined the police, I'd want to be chasing baddies all day, not standing outside a door thinking about whether or not I should have spaghetti hoops for me tea. However, she wisely kept that thought to herself as the policeman opened the door. Then, please take a seat, said an immaculately dressed butler. The staff were used to playing host to royalty in World Leaders at 10 Downing Street, not a little girl, a transvestite tramp and his dog. The Prime Minister will be with you shortly. They were standing in a big oak-panelled room with dozens of gold-framed old oil paintings of serious-looking old men staring at you. The tinsel around the frames did little to counter their severe looks. Suddenly, doors flew open, and a herd of men in suits approached them. Good afternoon, Mr. Stinky, said the Prime Minister. You could tell he was in charge as he was walking at the front of the herd. It's just Stink, Prime Minister, corrected one of his advisers. Oh, how you doing, mate? Said the Prime Minister, trying to downplay his poshness. He offered out his perfectly manicured and moisturised little hand for Mr. Stink to shake. The tramp offered his own big, dirty, gnarled hand, and looking at it, the Prime Minister quickly withdrew his, preferring to give his new best friend a mock punch on the shoulder. He then examined his knuckles and noticed they had some grime on them. Wet wipe, he demanded. Now! A man at the back of the herd hurriedly produced a wet wipe, and it was passed forward to the Prime Minister. He quickly wiped his hand with it before passing it back to the man. A pleasure to meet you too, Mr. Prime Minister, said Mr. Stink without conviction. Call me Dave, said the Prime Minister. Gosh! He does smell like a toilet, he whispered to one of his advisers. Mr. Stink looked at Chloe hurt, but the Prime Minister didn't notice. So, you made quite a splash on Question Time, my homeless pal, he continued. Ruddy hilarious. He wiped away a non-existent tear of laughter from his eye. I think we could use you. Use him, said Chloe. Yeah, hey, it's no secret. It's not looking good for me in this election. My approval rating with the public right now is... One of the herd hastily opened a folder, and there was a long pause as he flicked through the pages and information. Bad, right, yes, thanks, thanks, Perkins, yes, bad, said the Prime Minister sarcastically. It's Brownlow. Whatever. The Prime Minister turned back to Mr. Stink. I think if we had you, a real-life tramp, take over from Mrs. Crumb as candidate, it would be brilliant. It's far too late to rope in anyone else now, and you'd be the ideal last-minute replacement. You're just so funny. I mean, to laugh at, not really. With. Excuse me, said Chloe, feeling very protective of her friend. The Prime Minister ignored her. It's genius. It really is. If you joined the party, it would fool the public into thinking we cared about the homeless. I mean, maybe one day I could even make you Minister for Soap Dodgers. Soap Dodgers, said Mr. Stink. Yeah, the homeless. Right, said Mr. Stink. And as Minister for the Homeless, I'd be able to help other homeless people. Well, no, said the Prime Minister. It wouldn't mean anything. It just make me look like a fantastic tramp-loving guy. Well, what do you say, Mr. Stinky Poo? Mr. Stink looked very ill at ease. I don't... Well, I mean, I'm not sure. Are you kidding me? Laughed the Prime Minister. You're a tramp. You can't have anything better to do. The suited haired laughed. Suddenly, Chloe had a flashback to her school. The Prime Minister and his aides were behaving exactly like the gang of girls in her year. Still stumbling for words, Mr. Stink looked over to her for help. Prime Minister, said Chloe. Yes, he answered with an expectant smile. Why don't you stick it up your fat bum? You took the words right out of my mouth, child, chuckled Mr. Stink. Goodbye, Prime Minister, and Merry Christmas to you all. See you soon. Hiya! Mr. Stink. And it's chapter 22, Long Lion Days. Chloe and Mr. Stink weren't invited to take the helicopter home. They had to get the bus. As it was Christmas Eve, the bus was chock-a-block with people, most of them barely visible under the mountains of shopping bags. And as Chloe and Mr. Stink sat side by side on the top deck, bare branches dragged against the grimy windows. Did you see the look on his face when you told him to stick it up his... exclaimed Mr. Stink. I can't believe I said that, said Chloe. I'm so glad you did, said Mr. Stink. Thank you so much for sticking up for me. Well, you stuck up for me with that awful Rosamond. Stick it up your bum. So naughty. Though I might have said something far ruder. They laughed together. Mr. Stink reached into his trouser pocket to pull out a dirty old hanky to dry his tears. As he raised the handkerchief to his face, Chloe spotted the label that had been sewn into it. Peering closer, she saw that the label was made of silk and a name was embroidered. Lord Darlington, she read. There was silence for a moment. Is that you? Said Chloe. Are you a lord? No, said Mrs. Stink. I'm just a humble vagabond. I got this handkerchief from a jumble sale. May I see your silver spoon then? Said Chloe. Mr. Stink gave a resigned smile. He reached into a jacket pocket, slowly withdrew the spoon, and then handed it to her. Chloe turned it over in her hands, looking at it close up. She realised she'd been wrong. It wasn't 3 letters engraved, it was a single letter on a crest. A single capital letter D. You are Lord Darlington, said Chloe. Let me see that old photograph again. Mr. Stink carefully pulled out his old black and white photograph. Chloe studied it for a few seconds. It was just as she remembered. The beautiful young couple, the Rolls Royce, the stately home. Only now when she looked at it, she could see the resemblance between the young man in the photo and the old tramp beside her. And that's you in the picture? Chloe held the photograph delicately, knowing she was handling something very precious. Mr. Stink looked really young, especially without his beard and dirt, but the eyes were sparkling. It was unmistakably him. The game's up, Mr. Stink. Yep, that is me. A lifetime ago. And who's this lady with you? That's my wife. Your wife? I didn't know you were married. You didn't know I was a lord either, said Mr. Stink. And that must be your house then, Lord Darlington, said Chloe, indicating the stately home standing behind the couple in the photo. Mr. Stink nodded. Well then, how come you're homeless now? It's a really long story, my dear, said Mr. Stink. But I want to hear it, said Chloe, please. I've told you so much about my life and I've always wanted to know your story, Mr. Stink. Ever since I very first saw you, I always knew you must have a fascinating tale to tell. Mr. Stink took a breath. Oh, well, I had it all, child. More money than I could ever spend. A beautiful house with its own lake. My life was like an endless summer. Croquet, tea on the lawn, long lion days spent playing cricket. And to make things even more perfect, I married this beautiful, clever, funny, adorable woman. My childhood sweetheart, Violet. She's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, she is. She was. Unutterably so. We were deliriously happy, you know. It was all so obvious to Chloe. The way Mr. Stink had expertly bowled the screwed top piece of paper into the bin, his silver monogram cutlery and his impeccable table manners, his insistence on walking on the outside of the pavement, the way he decorated the shed, it was all true. He was super posh. Soon after that photograph was taken, Violet became pregnant, said Mr. Stink. I couldn't have been more thrilled. But one night, when my wife was 8 months pregnant, my chauffeur drove me to London to have dinner with a group of my old school friends at the Gentlemen's Club. It was just before Christmas, actually. And I stayed late into the night, selfishly drinking and talking and smoking cigars. What do you mean, selfishly? Said Chloe. Because I should never have gone. We were caught in a blizzard on the way home, and I didn't get back until just after dawn and found out that the house was ablaze. Oh no! Cried Chloe, not sure if she can bear to hear the rest of the story. A piece of coal must have fallen out of the fireplace in our bedroom, set the carpet alight as she slept. I ran out to the rolls and waded through the deep snow. Desperately, I tried to fight my way into the house, but the fire brigade wouldn't let me in. It took 5 of them to hold me back. They tried their best to save her, but it was just too late. The roof fell in. My Violet didn't stand a chance. Oh my God, Chloe gasped. Tears filled the old tramp's eyes. Chloe didn't know what to do. Dealing with emotions was a new thing to her, but tentatively she reached out her hand to comfort him. Time seemed to slow down as her hand reached his. This made the tears really flow, and she shook with half a century of pain. If only I hadn't been at the club that night, I could have saved her. I could have held her all night, made her feel safe and warm. She wouldn't have needed the fire. My darling, darling Violet. Chloe squeezed his dirty hand tight. You can't blame yourself for the fire. But I should have been there for her. I should have been there. It was an accident, said Chloe. You have to forgive yourself. I can't. I never can. You are a good man, Mr. Stink. What happened was just an accident, a terrible accident. You've got to believe that. Thank you, child. I shouldn't really cry, not on public transport. He sniffed and gathered himself together. So, said Chloe, how did you end up living on the streets? Well, I was heartbroken. Utterly inconsolable. I'd lost my baby and the woman I loved. After the funeral, I tried to return to the house. I lived alone in a wing that hadn't been so badly damaged by the blaze. But the house carried so many memories, I just couldn't sleep. Being there gave me terrible nightmares. I kept seeing her face in the flames. I had to get away. So one day I just started walking, and I never came back. I'm so sorry, said Chloe. If people only knew that. Look, like I said, on the televisual apparatus, every homeless person has a story to tell, said Mr. Stink. And that's mine. I'm sorry it didn't involve spies or pirates or whatever you think of. Real life just isn't like that. And I didn't mean to upset you. Christmas must be so hard for you, said Chloe. Yes, of course. Christmas is an emblem of perfect happiness. I find it hard to bear. It's a time when families come together, but for me, it's a reminder for who's not there. The bus reached the stop. Chloe's arm found a home in Mr. Stink's as they walked towards the family house. She was relieved to see that all the reporters and camera crews had moved on. The funny old tramp must be old news by now. I just wish I could make everything right, said Chloe. But you are making everything right, Miss Chloe. Ever since you came and talked to me, you've made me smile again. You've made me feel happy. You've been so kind to me. You know, if my child had ended up like you, I would have been so very proud. Chloe was so touched she could hardly think what to say. Well, I know you would have made a great dad. Thank you, child. Unimaginable kindness. Nearing the house, Chloe looked at it and realised something. She didn't want to go home. She didn't want to live with her awful mother and have to go to that horrible posh school anymore. They walked in silence for a moment, then Chloe took a deep breath and turned to Mr. Stink. I don't want to go back there, she said. I want to go wandering with you.